You see, everything in this part of the Bible, which is the Old Testament, is pointing forward to Him. Everything that's in this part of the Bible is pointing back to Him. Because this is a Jesus book. Not only must we have Christocentric worship, we need to have a Christocentric life and lifestyle. Amen. You're going to be seated. Colossians 1:16 again. For by Him were all things created, that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and by Him all things consist. And He is the head of the body of the church, which is the beginning, the firstborn of the dead, that in all things He might have the preeminence. For it pleased the Father that in Him should all fullness dwell. You got to understand something. Jesus is the focus of this book. Amen. Let me find it in this physical Bible. Amen. You see, everything in this part of the Bible, which is the Old Testament, is pointing forward to Him. Everything that's in this part of the Bible is pointing back to Him. Because this is a Jesus book. He's the supreme focus of the Bible. Can I tell you, from the 3rd chapter in Genesis to the last chapter in Revelation, God is revealing His plan to bring a Redeemer who would not only forgive sins and would bring salvation, but would rule over all creation. Amen. He created all things. He holds all things together. He's supreme. Amen. And if the focus of the Word is Jesus, then maybe it's a good idea for us to have the same focus. Amen. If you call yourself a Christian, then you should be focusing on Christ. He should be the focus of your life in every area. Well, you know, I have my church life and then I have my outside of church life. No, I have a Christocentric life. Every part of my life is rooted and anchored in Jesus Christ. Amen. He should be the focus of your work life. Amen. Why? Because you should be doing work in a way that honors God and reflects biblical characteristics of integrity and non-favoritism. That when people look at the way you work, they say, that reminds me of how a Christian ought to live. It might open the door for you to share the good news of the gospel with your coworkers. Amen. He should be the focus of your family life. Amen. Now, I'm not saying you have to have an hour-long family devotion every night. But how you run your family should show a focus on Jesus Christ. Is the only exposure your family gets to Christ at church in this building? Or is there a little bit of heaven on earth in your family home? Come on. Husbands, this especially applies to you. Because Bible says that your marriage is to be a model of the love Christ has for His church. So if you're not honoring your wife and loving her as Christ loved the church, you're not allowing a focus on Christ in your marriage. You can say amen or oh me, either one. Let me ask you this. Are you raising your children to love God, to love His Word? Are you raising them to see God in the Bible as just a nice little distraction from the rest of the daily hustle and bustle of life? Or worse yet, is it just a way to keep a spiritual face so that you don't appear non-spiritual to your family? I want my kids to know Jesus is at the center of it all. Our life, our family life is about Jesus. Well, since we're there, let's just go a little bit deeper. Jesus should be the focus of your recreation and entertainment life. Come on, is the kind of music and movies and books and magazines, whatever you read, whatever hobbies you participate in, can Jesus be honored in and through all of that? I think some people pray, God, don't come now because I'm missing church for sports. Is He really the center of our lives? You know, where you go, what you do to unwind after a long day of work, does that honor God? Does that display a focus of Christ in your life? Dr. Paul Tripp said that if God does not reign over the mundane events in our life, He doesn't reign at all. He's either Lord of all or He's not Lord at all. And so, Jesus, I want you to be at the center of my life. But here's what's disturbing. A recent survey by George Gallup revealed a startling trend in our culture. According to Gallup, the evidence seems to indicate that there are no clear behavioral patterns that distinguish Christians from non-Christians in our society. In other words, the people who profess the name of Christ are not living in a significantly different fashion than those who don't even name the name of Christ. Seems like we're all marching to the beat of the same drummer, looking to the shifting standards of contemporary culture for the basis of what is acceptable behavior. Can I tell you that is a sad statistic indeed? Tells me that there's a lot of so-called Christians, but there's very few disciples. Because He called us in the last couple of Wednesday nights. We've talked about that different lifestyle that God has called us to. And if that's not convicting enough, let me give you one more. Gordon Dahl said, most middle-class Americans tend to worship their work, work at their play, and play at their worship. Doesn't that just kind of get right to the heart of it? Most middle-class Americans tend to worship their work, work at their play, and play at their worship. God, let it not be so among us. So I need to honestly evaluate my life today and ask, is Jesus and His church at the center of my life? How can I evaluate that? Well, a good indicator is by looking at my calendar and my wallet. Because it's easy to say, Jesus, I put you first. But do you give Him the first fruits of your money? If you look at your calendar, do you give Him the leftovers or the priority? Is my life focused on all the activities of life I've managed to squeeze in, and Jesus kind of gets whatever is left over? But Pastor, you don't understand. I don't have time to pray. But you have time for all kinds of other extracurricular activities, which, by the way, are choices. And newsflash, I've been pastoring a long time. Your kids have about a 0.0001% chance of being a major league star. But they have a 100% chance of going to heaven or hell. So let me preach to some parents today. Don't try to relive your teenage life through your kids' life, because you didn't make it. You want them to make it. He's at the center of it all. Galatians 2:20 says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. In the life I now live, I live by the faith I live in the flesh by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me.